Bambu Lab entered the 3D printing scene 2 years ago by absolutely disrupting everything with the release of the X1. It was highly praised for its combination of high-speed printing, multicolor capability, reliability, and advanced features like a LiDAR sensor and a camera for AI-driven print monitoring and time-lapses, which continues to be a bit unprecedented in a consumer-grade 3D printer. While these features have been available on existing 3D printers on the market, whether out of the box or as an available upgrade, Bambu Lab were the first to package everything into an amazing out-of-the-box experience in a sleek, user-friendly 3D printer. And then, most importantly, price it competitively. And I think it's fair to say that they set a new standard for the industry. If you were to mark when 3D printing went from a niche to a mainstream hobby, it would probably be the release of the X1, similar to how the iPhone was the start of mainstream smartphone appeal, despite smartphones being around for many years before it. Released at the same time as the X1, also as part of their Kickstarter campaign, was its more popular big brother, the X1 Carbon. It shares almost all the same specs as the X1, it has the same 256mm cubed build volume, Core XY design, carbon rails, high-speed printing capability, and so on. But it also includes a hardened steel nozzle and extruder gears, which makes it ideal for printing with nylon or polycarbonate filament, or straight up essential if you want to print with carbon fiber or glass reinforced filament, which would damage a regular steel nozzle. It also has the camera pre-installed because at the time, the base X1 only had the camera as an optional add-on. And to really set it apart, the X1 Carbon has an aluminium shell, unlike the plastic shell of the base X1. These 3D printers were popular immediately, raising $10 million on Kickstarter. The hype around them was insane considering this was Bambu Labs' first product. I was back in number 33, which luckily meant I was at the front of the line, and my X1 Carbon arrived just 2 months later. For the release of a 3D printer, especially one released on Kickstarter, that was an insane timeline. I think there's a few big reasons why these printers took off so well. First, the out-of-the-box experience. It truly takes under 15 minutes to get it out of the box and up and printing. Number 2, the appearance. Everything from the UI to the exterior and premium materials say luxury. Number 3, the camera. Being able to easily record and share time-lapses was a game changer, and Bambu Lab had no idea. People started sharing their time-lapses like crazy, and of course the Bambu Lab branding was visible everywhere, which meant they got a lot of free advertising from it. But most importantly, I think was because of the multi-material capability of the Automatic Material System, or AMS for short. It was announced and launched alongside the X1 and X1C, and it was clear from the beginning that this was going to be huge because no other company had streamlined multi-material printing quite like this before. Bambu Lab promised to make it simple and compact. Just plug the AMS into your printer, load up to 4 rows of filament, and you're ready to go. When you're slicing, just paint some colors in before you start, and the printer will automatically swap to the correct color when it's needed. Or you can load multiple filaments of the same color, and it'll just swap to the next when one runs out. The big reveal though was that you could daisy chain up to 4 AMSs to a single 3D printer using the AMS hub, allowing for up to 16 color printing. This was huge, and it still is. But it did come with a big downside: wastage. Whenever a filament swap occurs, the printer poops a tiny bit of filament out the back to prepare the nozzle for a new filament. Unfortunately for large prints that use lots of colors, you might end up with more wasted filament than used filament. Wastage can be mitigated to an extent, or in some cases completely, but it does remain an issue on Bambu Lab printers. So please remember to reduce, reuse, and recycle where you can. The Prusa XL, for example, solves this problem by using separate extruders for each filament so that they don't need to be purged. I don't have a Prusa XL to do a detailed comparison, but maybe we'll see this feature on more 3D printers in the future. The next 3D printer was the P1P, the budget-oriented version of the X1. It's what happens when you take an X1 and start removing all the parts that aren't necessary. Shell? Gone. Screen? Make it worse. Door and lid? Nah. Camera and LiDAR sensor? Get rid of them. The electronics were also downgraded, cooling fans were made optional, and there was no air filter. However, it was mostly compatible with all the same parts from the X1, including of course the AMS. While this machine was an obvious downgrade, it was praised at launch simply for being a really good deal. My favorite part about this printer was that instead of including a shell, they instead included the files for the shell so that you could 3D print it yourself at home. For the people who didn't want to do that though, the next machine from Bambu Lab was the P1S, their mid-range option. Take the P1P and add the plastic shell, camera, fan control, and air filter back on, and bam, you've got a P1S. Around this time, Bambu Lab figured out that making the camera included out of the box was the way to go. Again, it's just free advertising when people share their print time lapses. So they made sure to include a camera and an LED light in the P1S, and also went back and upgraded the P1P to come pre-installed with them at the same price. Compared to the X series though, the P series camera was only 720p compared to the 1080p, and also limited to 5 FPS for live streaming, unlike the X1's 30 FPS. For creating time lapses though, the frame rate doesn't have a big effect anyway. So here we are at the end of phase 1 with 4 Bambu Lab, make that 3 Bambu Lab 3D printers. The X1 was discontinued around the same time the P1S came out, I assume because they were both trying to be the mid-range 3D printer, and the X1C and X1 were already so similar that it just made sense to quietly discontinue it. I'm not sure when exactly they happened, but the AMS has also been through at least 2 or 3 revisions, with the mainboard and filament rollers being incrementally improved. Bambu Lab also introduced their textured build plate, which started coming standard with the P1P and P1S, rather than the previous smooth build plates. I'm sure there's been other small changes along the way. I think I've caught the major ones, but if I've missed anything, please let me know in the comments. Next, it was time for Bambu Lab to change things up a bit with the introduction of the A1 Mini, their new budget option at half the price of the P1P. Gone is the Core XY build, this is a bed slinger, which is a term Bambu Lab themselves helped to popularize when they launched the X1 to shame other 3D printer manufacturers. However, this style does mean that Bambu can get the price quite a bit lower than what a Core XY build would allow for. Everything that people now expect from a Bambu Lab printer is here. It's cloud connected, it has a camera, auto bed leveling, and so on. It's also significantly smaller than their other 3D printers, as the name implies, with a 180mm cubed print volume. Overall, this is a great beginner 3D printer. It's solid, relatively cheap, but also has premium features that you might not expect in other similarly priced printers. But the closer you look, the weirder it gets. Instead of a purge chute out the back, for example, material just gets flung off the side. And the filament cutter is activated by the extruder slamming itself on this odd protrusion here. While this is a really good printer, it's also just a tiny bit odd, you know? It's really clear that some big decisions were made to get this thing to a low price. Saying that though, it also has a color touchscreen, which its more expensive siblings don't, and a speaker and a quick swap nozzle, which none of the others have. One thing that you should know about the A1 Mini is that it's not compatible with the AMS. Instead, it's compatible with the new AMS Lite. The AMS Lite is even weirder. It looks like a crazy alien spaceship, and just like the A1 Mini, it was designed to be as cheap as they could get it, but with the same level of polish their expensive devices get. So unlike the regular AMS, this one isn't enclosed and doesn't have rollers to rewind and load filament. Instead, the spools get positioned onto the side and the holders are actually spring-loaded, which handles the filament unloading. It works a lot differently than the regular AMS. With the AMS Lite, all the filament tubes get connected directly to the tool head, unlike the regular AMS where only one filament tube actually exits the AMS. Also, only one AMS Lite can be connected, limiting the A1 to a maximum of 4 colors. And it may look weird, but it works. The downside though is that it takes up a lot of room since it can't be placed on top of the A1 Mini, and you've got so many tubes and wires to contend with that the A1 Mini may actually require more space than the P1P, for example. After the release of the A1 Mini, we take an unexpected turn with the release of the X1E. It's the enterprise version of the X1C built for, well, enterprises. They added a few new features on top of the X1C that businesses would find handy, but decided against adding to their consumer-oriented 3D printers, like more connection options and an Ethernet port, active chamber heating, heavy-duty air filtration, and a hotter hot end. You can also remotely control the X1E within your local network, which removes the need to connect to the Bambu cloud service entirely. And I know a lot of people have asked for this feature, so I really hope we'll see these features make their way into Bambu Labs' consumer-oriented 3D printers sometime in the future. Getting back on track, the next printer was the A1. It's like the A1 Mini, just not mini. It shares a lot of similarities, of course, same camera, same screen, same parts, same vibe, just bigger. It uses the same build plates as the P and X series and has the same build volume as well. It's just a good old reliable i3 style printer, and it's not as quick as the P1S or X1C, but if I was to start over in the 3D printing world, I'd probably choose this one over the A1 Mini just because of the increased print volume. It also solves the problem of the AMS Lite taking up so much room, because you can print this official part that places it on top of the printer. It also requires some reinforcement, but it makes sense if you have limited space. The A1 has everything that I look for in a 3D printer, and if I'm really honest with myself, both the P1S and X1C might be a little overkill for most of my needs. So like I said, if I had to start over, the A1 would probably be my first choice. And with that, Bambu Lab now have 5 consumer-level 3D printers at almost every price point, except the extreme low end. Plus, you can't forget about the discontinued X1 and the Enterprise X1E on top. Say what you want about Bambu Lab, the truth is that they've disrupted the industry by making genuinely good products that people want. In the few years it's been since I've entered the market, it's hard to imagine the industry without them. Like all products though, they might not be for everyone, and that's fine. Personally, I'm really excited about other manufacturers adopting features that these printers have popularized. And I'm even more excited about seeing Bambu Lab adopt features from other brands as well. Whenever a major disruption like this happens in the maker world, we usually see a whole lot of competition and then the whole industry prosper as a result. And I really hope that Bambu Lab's entry is no different. But what comes next? Now, I don't have any insider Bambu Lab knowledge, but these are my predictions. First, I'm expecting the next generation of X series printers, maybe starting with the X2 to release sometime this year. My guess is that it'll be mostly the same as the X1 Carbon, but feature a handful of tiny upgrades and improvements. It also makes sense for an AMS2 or just an AMS revision to release alongside of it as well. Second, I'm expecting a slightly larger 3D printer. Maybe it'll be a whole new device, or maybe the X2 will be bigger, but my guess is that the X2 will be roughly the same size as the X1 and use the same print plates, and a separate large format 3D printer will be released. Maybe it'll be the Y1 or Z1 or Y2 or Z2, I don't know, but I don't think just making it larger is good enough for Bambu, so maybe they'll come out with a multi-extruder printer like the Prusa XL. I could even see an A1 Max launching relatively soon. That's higher on my predictions than a Y or Z series launch because it seems way more feasible. My final prediction that probably has the least chance of happening is an ultra-budget 3D printer. I think Bambu Lab is hesitant about this in case they erode their reputation as a premium brand, but something like an A1 Mini Lite could enter them into this market if they stripped it down as far as they could. It would be extreme, but a cameraless, touchscreenless, AMS-less printer could work. I don't really see it happening, but maybe, casting my net wide here. Let me know what your predictions are in the comments, and I'll revisit this again in a year or two and see if any of our predictions were correct. Cheers.